off and running on a Friday here on VSiN PrimeTime. That gentleman right there is Jonathan Von Tobel. I am Tim Murray. We're live the first hour of this program for free. YouTube.com/VSiN Live. We've got the Garden front and center on this Friday evening. And how about those patrons taking in a phenomenal Friday here, JVT. It is a packed house at 3 o'clock on a Friday, getting ready for a loaded slate of college hoops.
So I'm a mentally strong man.
You are.
You know what I mean? And I'm at a point, I'm not drinking any beer. I'm not ingesting alcohol libations, trying to cut down
Hear
on
that,
some
Dustin?
weight.
Taking you down.
Having said that, man, when I walked in and I felt this juice, my palms started getting itchy. I wanted to go sit at a video poker machine and watch some college basketball and drink some beers and hang out and scream. The energy's awesome. This is absolutely fantastic. Walking in here is a total vibe. We are in, of course, a vast majority of conference tournament semifinals. This is absolutely fantastic. You and I are going to go check out a conference tournament later tonight. Next Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday is going to be awesome. But there's something special about this week, baby. Something special.
There really is. And late last night, sitting on my couch after I endured another brutal overtime is where dogs go to die. The New Mexico Lobos are the New Mexico Lobos.
Right.
VSiN PrimeTime's
Los Lobos.
favorite team.
I never lost hope.
Took care of business. And we will get to their showdown later on this evening against Colorado State in our Best Bets portion of the program. A couple things I want to start the show with here. First and foremost, Tennessee knocked off today by Mississippi State. They were catching, Mississippi State was, double digits. At one point, 10.5. I grabbed a little piece of 10.5 on Mississippi State. Desperate T. We talked to Brad Evans a little bit about the desperation of teams. We saw that front and center with New Mexico last night. I thought they had a little extra hitch in their giddy up as they got the win over Boise State. The Tennessee loss led to a lot of, Rick Barnes, this is what Rick Barnes does. He loses in March. Yes, Rick Barnes and his teams have not had a ton of success in the NCAA tournament.
Every other team has, though.
JVT, I take you to the second round last year when Duke played Tennessee, and Duke was probably getting like 75% of the bets. Every jabron in the world was on Duke. Surprisingly, the worst coach in the history of the NCAA tournament, Rick Barnes, he won that game. What? They won the SEC. But the SEC, JVT, the SEC, it's down this year. It's not a very good league, the Southeastern Conference. It's not, per Ken Palm, the fourth best conference in college basketball that has Auburn, Alabama, Kentucky, South Carolina. Even though they didn't look the part today, they'll be in the NCAA tournament. Texas A&M, maybe they'll get in if they beat Kentucky later today. They didn't win that conference outright. Rick Barnes, he sucks.
Yeah, so it's one of my little pet peeves. This is not what I'm a little irritated about today, but I'll tie in our colleague here, Jared Smith, who yesterday tweeted out because Duke had lost their first conference tournament game, that they thus cannot win the NCAA tournament because a team in the past that had won their first conference tournament game had never gone on to win the NCAA tournament.
Lost.
And it's lost. Excuse me. Yes, thank you. And it's like, well, just for two things. Just because it's never happened before doesn't mean it can never happen. And do you know how hard it is to win an NCAA tournament? There's a lot of coaches who are successful that have got pretty far that have never really won this thing.
Matt Painter's the worst coach in the history of the world, according to most people out there.
And I think personally, with that thought process when it comes to Duke or what you're talking about here with Tennessee, I think you put yourself in a position to be very wrong, and lose if you just think because it's happened before, it's going to happen again. Because I don't believe in Rick Barnes, he's going to fail every step of the way. And like you mentioned, that's a really good example. Oh, Rick Barnes stinks. Of course he's going to lose to Duke. Of course they're going to lose to Duke. And it didn't really play out that way. This is a good Tennessee team, man.
3.5-point dog last year in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Tennessee won by 13.
Right, and they're going to be, a 2 seed, a 1 seed, whatever. But they're
probably a 2 now.
They're a top 30 team on offense. They're a top 10 team on defense. I'll take my chances if I want to back a team like that to make a deep run. And if you want to fade them, you can. But I agree with you. Just this whole thought process of it hasn't happened before, so it's going to happen again. He stinks. You put yourself in a position to be pretty wrong.
I do wonder, and we'll be on the air betting the bracket ding, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday when the bracket is out and we will have point spreads. Look, Tennessee will be a 2 seed more than likely, and I think most people will anticipate them to win said matchup. But depending on that 7-10 matchup, I think people will expect them to maybe be an upset pick. Mm-hmm. Let's not forget that this is a Tennessee team led by an absolute baller in Dalton Knecht, who's going to win SEC Player of the Year and has had some enormous games like, I don't know, going on the road and beating Alabama and beating Auburn at home. And yes, they have lost 2 in a row. Do I think Tennessee will win the national championship? Probably not. But it's what we fall into every year where it's just like, Tennessee sucks. And I'm like, I don't know. I think they're pretty good. They won the SEC outright. So we'll see what the bracket says. And, hey, if they lose in the second round this year, enjoy your Rick Barnes stinks and can't get it done in March tweets. But let's just not forget, I remember very wholeheartedly last year sitting on my couch when Tennessee was struggling against the 12 seed in Louisiana Lafayette, and I tweeted something out to the effect, well, I'm going to have to bet them in the second round. And sure enough, they won said second-round matchup. Sure. Now, they lost to FAU, who went to the Final Four, and ultimately FAU was one shot away from playing in the national championship game. But this is what we fall into every single year. Just be careful. Tennessee lost today. Does it mean that they are screwed for the NCAA tournament? I don't think so.
Right.
We'll see what the bracket ultimately unveils. By the way, UConn is up 8 on St. John's. This is a fun one to have to watch throughout the show here this evening. A lot of other news to get to outside of college basketball. Best bets coming up bottom of the hour. We'll hit on the NBA card as well as every day. JVT writes that up, VSiN.com. Make sure you go check that out. It is free the whole week. Everything on VSiN.com, completely free. But a big trade today for draft picks as the Minnesota Vikings, JVT, who we all know by now, they no longer have Kirk Cousins, who has moved on to the Atlanta Falcons. The Minnesota Vikings have now secured a second first-round pick as the Vikings have grabbed the Texans pick, the 23rd overall pick, in exchange for a second-round pick and their 6th-round pick, as well as a 2025 second-round pick. So now the Minnesota Vikings have the 11th pick and the 23rd pick, JVT, which certainly seems to indicate that the Minnesota Vikings are getting the chips together to make another move to go get a quarterback high in the draft.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think they're getting the Bears pick?
No.
Do you think they're getting the Washington pick?
No.
Okay. So the obvious choice is the New England Patriots. Trade up to 3, okay?
Yep.
What I don't understand what Minnesota's doing here is you're trading away assets to get another one, to then put those assets together to have the third bite at the apple.
This is what the 49ers did just a couple of years ago.
Right. And so
which worked out really well, by the way.
Yeah, like I don't really buy it. And because here's the thing again, we don't know. You could sell that you know exactly who, like whoever that third pick is going to be. Let's say it's J.J. McCarthy. Let's say it's Drake May, whatever. Let's say it's Jaden Daniels. Who knows? You could say, this is the guy we wanted the whole time. There's no way you know that you're going to get that guy. So I think it's a flawed way of kind of operating here if you're Minnesota, sacrificing assets and then sacrificing even more to hope that the guy at the top of your board is going to be there at 3, unless you know that you're about to reach for a guy, right? Unless you know, like, oh no, Bo Nix is going to be there. We're trading up to get, like, so I just don't really love this logic from Minnesota, like especially this early. If you were to do this knowing like, hey, and maybe that's the plan. Maybe they're going to hold on to these picks, and maybe if their guys there are 3, they'll just burn down the doors of New England, ship off all this stuff, and go and get him. But it does seem, and maybe if that doesn't happen, they'll use these 2 first-round picks. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that if we're all thinking this in terms of this is the package to go to get up, and the most likely spot would be 3, then I just don't understand that line of thinking, because you're willingly saying, like, yeah, we'll take the third shot at this. We'll take the third best prospect at quarterback because the other 2 guys are going to be gone. And I think that's kind of a flawed way of operating here if you're Minnesota.
If you're wondering, because our guy Thor Nystrom, who joins us on a weekly basis to talk NFL draft, he's a Minnesota-based guy, and he has been on the train of J.J. McCarthy to the Minnesota Vikings for a long time. And he now sits, J.J. McCarthy that is, to go to Minnesota at DraftKings at even money. Please don't make that bet. even if it comes home, please don't make that bet. It is way too early to assume that J.J. McCarthy is going to go to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you think J.J. McCarthy and one of the shops here in town, Stations Casino, who had a J.J. McCarthy prop at 6.5, if you wanted to bet under 6.5, okay, I could see that. But for him to pencil him into Minnesota on March 15th, when they still have another move to make,
Sure.
Pump the brakes a little bit. But it certainly seems like the Minnesota Vikings, JVT, are going to grab a quarterback with their first selection in the draft.
And doesn't this seem somewhat at odds with what we've heard a little bit? So I'll just say, so again, we're assuming Chicago. Let's go with the market.
Yep.
Caleb Williams, number 1.
Yep.
Washington, Jaden Daniels, number 2.
That's
Let's say again
what the market says.
Yeah, what the market says. But if J.J. McCarthy is this prospect that we are being told that he is, why is a team in the New England Patriots who need a quarterback of the future, again, we're assuming that this is the trade you're going to make, why are they going to be willing to move out of 3? You see what I'm saying? Like, all of these things kind of conflict with one another, and it doesn't really, jive with what we thought. Now, again, so New England, I've always said, build the roster first and go get the quarterback. Maybe that's what they're going to do. But if he's this can't-miss prospect, why would New England pass up on him?
It's going to be a great show. A lot to get to. Look at the crowd here at Circa Sportsbook. We will talk to Eric Eager on the other side of this break. We'll get his thoughts and his perspective on the trade that went down today. Best bets coming up. Bottom of the hour. It is VSiN Primetime.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
You only got a couple of days left, folks. Try out a VSiN Pro subscription absolutely free through Selection Sunday. Go to VSiN.com/champweek to opt in. You'll get everything we do, everything. It's a full subscription. VSiN picks, full betting splits data from DraftKings, unlimited access to all the pro articles, and more. Check it out, VSiN.com/champweek.
Best bets coming up bottom of the hour right now at Madison Square Garden. UConn with a 7-point lead over St. John's. 7 minutes to go in that one. Your live line, UConn minus 12.5 at DraftKings. So best bets for college basketball, NBA as well, coming up in just a little bit. But let's continue this conversation we were just having. And, our next guest joins us every Friday, JVT. It's Eric Eager. He joins us on the Progressive Guest Line. He was going to join us on video, but he spent the last hour and a half yelling at people on social media, so he has not gotten to his camera.
Don't sell the man short. He was clanging and banging in the gym, too.
Well, he was getting pumped up to start tweeting out because people are challenging his take on the Minnesota Vikings. We were just talking about the Vikings trade, Eric, to acquire the Texans pick, to move into the first round. They now have 2 picks in the first round. Certainly seems to indicate they're going to go up to get a quarterback. What did you make of the move today by the Minnesota Vikings to get another first-round pick?
Yeah, to me, it's clearly signaling that they're going to move up. It's weird to me, though, that they just didn't do a 3-way trade or just even trade up completely. It's pretty clear they want to keep their first-round pick for next year in case things go haywire. I also think moving up to the 23rd pick sort of gives them the opportunity in case, somebody were to offer, say, Arizona at pick 4, New England at pick 3, a better offer, that they could sit there and take Michael Penix at 23 or Bo Nix at 23, something like that. Those seem a little bit rich for my blood as far as where either one of those men would go. But I think that's what they're doing. But they paid about 400 points on the Jimmy Johnson chart to move up to this spot. And if they're going to move into the top 5, that those picks are hugely a premium. So, with respect to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, usually an analytical GM, I think he's just looking at the trade charts and thinking, quarterback is more valuable than any other position, and it's time to pay a premium.
So, Eric, we're assuming, right, like you said, it's going to be 3 or 4. But to me, and I was making this case to Tim, I don't understand the logic of you, like you said, paying a premium for a quarterback, but also paying a premium for the 3rd or the 4th bite at the apple when it comes to the quarterbacks. I feel like that's just not really smart.
Well, it generally is, though. I mean, if you look at the first pick in the draft, for example, which is probably the easiest way to look at it, the quarterback, if you take a quarterback with the first pick of the draft, over the first 4 years of their career, they're generally worth 4 times as many wins above replacement as a non-quarterback. So in most cases, it's pick your price trading up. It's just for me, to your point, JVT, you're going after the third or fourth best quarterback. So you must feel like you might like Drake May more than Jaden Daniels. And I know I've said on this show that I thought May was going second. The market has certainly gone against me a little bit on that one. Or you're more than willing to say, Kevin O'Connell, I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy. I'm going to have two great tackles in O'Neal and Darisaw. Hawkinson off an ACL is still a pretty good tight end. And obviously you have Addison, the first rounder last year, and Jefferson, on a Hall of Fame trajectory at wide receiver. They're probably thinking, look, he might be the fourth best quarterback in this draft, but we can build an infrastructure around him to make him look like he's the first best. If that's the case, then it makes a lot of sense.
So to the point of McCarthy, too, and maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, so that's why I like to ask you these sort of questions. If McCarthy, because we're hearing how good McCarthy could be as a prospect, all these sort of things. If what we're hearing about him as a prospect is true, Eric, why would a team like New England willingly trade out of 3 if that's the assumption and not just take J.J. McCarthy there?
It's a good question. I think if you're New England, you're in a different situation than the Vikings because, they're not a very good team, not a ton of talent. I know that they've scaffolded around it this offseason a little bit with some of the free agents. They brought back Kendrick Bourne off of a season-long injury and everything like that. They got Josh Uche back. There's another thing about New England that I think is sneaky here as well, if you're looking at futures with them, is we don't know how bad their defense will be without Belichick. We've seen guys who have left that stable, Jamie Collins, even Matthew Judon was a much better Patriot than he was a Raven. J.C. Jackson was a much better Patriot than he was a Charger. Jelani Tavai was a good linebacker for the Patriots. He was an abject disaster for the Lions. So I think that the other part with this Patriots team is it might be even worse than the product on the field was last year because the defense is actually fairly good. And you wonder, without some blue chip players on that side of the ball, is it better for them just to trade back instead of throwing a quarterback out to the Wolves with an unproven coaching staff and a bad roster?
Eric Eager joining us here on VSiN PrimeTime on our progressive guest line. He's VP of Sumer Sports. They're doing great things over there. Make sure you check them out on Twitter, on YouTube, and also 7 o'clock Eastern every Friday night. You can make sure to check out the Sumer Sports Draft Show on SiriusXM's NFL channel. And their special guest today will be former offensive lineman Jeff Schwartz. So, this just kind of popped in my head today because we've talked a little bit about the AFC South and the moves that they've made so far as a division. You asked the question, JVT, yesterday, what are the Titans doing? And I think that's a fair question. But I also wonder, too, Jacksonville has I think only 1 year left, if I'm not mistaken, on the rookie wage of Trevor Lawrence. What is Jacksonville doing? I'm trying to figure them out, because Houston's getting better, and it feels like Jacksonville, the team we were all intrigued about 2 years ago, kind of seems to be spinning their wheels a little bit.
Yeah, to me, so they have 1 more year. They're going to pick up Trevor Lawrence's fifth-year option. So, because he's played pretty well, I think it's going to be more expensive than most rookie deals, but it's still not going to be in that $50 million range that an extension would be. I think you're still, by the way that these things work, you have a cheap year this year, you have a cheap year in the 5th year, you probably have somewhat of a cheap year in the 6th year, and then in the 7th year is when you start to see kind of it ramp up a little bit. So they have some time, but the free agency didn't make a lot of sense to me with Gabe Davis coming in, replacing Calvin Ridley. When I watched that offense at the end of the season, they just didn't have answers, and there weren't a lot of guys open. And I know Ridley was part of that problem, but I think he could have been part of the solution. Gabe Davis is not necessarily a great separator. I think he's more of a 50-50 ball guy. And so I look at that offense, Travis Etienne's not an explosive running back. He's kind of more of a plotter, even though I think he came out of Florida with more of a reputation. They're going to give Tank Bigsby the ball a little bit more. I'm just a little worried about that team. Press Taylor has been kind of under the been under the gun a little bit. Yeah, it's tough. And now that you have Houston, who is, they went and got Donnell Hunter, Joe Mixon. They already have, the division in their hand and a playoff win underneath their belt. They're squarely behind the 8 ball, behind Houston here. And you wonder how long Doug Peterson is for that job.
Am I wrong in loving the addition of Derrick Henry so much to Baltimore?
I don't think so. I think that, Keaton Mitchell was somebody before he got hurt there too with the speed. And you look at that offensive line, they got Ronnie Stanley under a new contract for this year, so they'll be able to do that. I think the only thing that can stop that offense, guys, is basically Todd Monken going on tilt when they're behind like they did in the AFC Championship game. You know, I feel like they're going to be able to get Henry going. Remember, Henry is a end of the season guy. When you look at his yards per carry, it goes up month by month. I think what they're going to do and what they should do is probably lay off of him for the first few months of the year and then hope in the second half of the year where the Ravens have often struggled, especially in January, they're going to lean on him a little bit more. I think that they took the lessons from the AFC Championship game and said, look, we got to lean into our identity. Lamar Jackson's a great quarterback, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. We can't drop him back 40 times a game and expect to win in January.
Eric Eager joining us here on VSiN Primetime. As I alluded to, he and Thomas Dimitrov will be giving you the Sumer Sports Draft Show every Friday at 7 o'clock Eastern. So I want to ask you a question that we discussed a little bit earlier this week. And we laughed a little bit, and it came slightly at the expense of some of my former colleagues in the D.C. area. But JVT brought up the point of the notion that Marcus Mariota going to Washington, well, that means they're picking Jaden Daniels. I guess ultimately, what did you make of that signing? And is there a correlation? I don't want to lead the witness, but my assumption is they're still going to evaluate the two quarterbacks and pick the one they think is best.
Well, and we've seen this a lot of times in the NFL where the backup quarterback is not always the same kind of, and I say kind of.
Look at Joe Flacco in Indianapolis.
No, what are you talking about? Both the same athlete.
Yeah, well. And a lot of times we've seen kind of and look, Drake May is a very good athlete for his size and arm strength and things like that. So to even call him a statuesque quarterback, I think is selling him short. It's not clear to me that you make your moves in free agency to complement the players in the draft. They could be moving up for Caleb Williams for all we know, and that could be a case. Why did they trade Sam Howell in a pick swap and not just get a fifth rounder all told for him? Maybe because, same thing the Vikings did with their trade. They're trying to get higher up assets, so when they trade up further, that those assets are more attractive. So I think that it could be one of many things. I do think Daniels is a favorite. I do respect the market. It's not as sharp of a market as size and totals, but it is an interesting move. I don't think it cements Jaden Daniels in Washington, though.
Eric, always appreciate it, man. Have a great weekend.
Hey, take care, guys.
There he is. Eric Eager joining us on our progressive guest line at Sumer Sports and Sumer Sports Draft Show coming up at the top of the hour. JVT's fired up about something going on in the MAC. We got our best bets for tonight. We're live on YouTube as well. YouTube.com/VSiN Live.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Selection Sunday is right around the corner, and when it's over, make sure you hit up the Vegas Stats and Information Network because we're going to be hosting Betting the Bracket. Tim Murray and myself analyzing every single matchup. We get opening lines, give out bracket advice as well, and you'll hear from our cast of characters here at VSiN all throughout the show. That's Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And remember, VSiN Pro Access through March 17th. Hit up VSiN.com/Champ Week.
I'm fired up for that show. It's always a great show. Breaking down the bracket as soon as it comes out. We'll have lines. We'll have Johnny Avello, Matt Grill, Matt Humans, Wes Reynolds, Adam Burke. Everybody will come on, give us their thoughts of the bracket. JVT and I will break it down as well. So, while everyone else will be on the airways, who's going to, what's the upset pick? We'll be talking point spreads. That's what you can get for 3 hours, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And it'll be on YouTube as well, youtube.com/VSiN Live.
The eventual upset of a 10 seed over a 7 in which the 10 seed was favored, but we'll all talk about it as an upset.
By the way, good one going on in Madison Square Garden. You talked about it, JVT. The juices were flowing when you walked in today, and you wish you could be sitting with a cold beverage. Maybe, not these Circa waters, which are lovely, and we enjoy drinking them, but maybe something a little more bubbly.
Nice mineral water,
I am a big carbonated water guy.
I gotten into it a little bit lately.
Yeah.
I'm
not a juice guy. I'm not a soda guy, so I like the carbonated sodas. Or
a little Topo Chico.
Yeah, a little. But right now, UConn up 46-41. This has been a fun game to keep our eyes on here in the semifinals of the Big East tournament. How about this? This is the first time that St. John's has played on the Friday night at the Garden since 2000. Holy smokes, it's been that long. That's what happens, man. You get Rick Pitino.
It was 9.
And you're able to win some games. He's going to call out your team a time or two, and ultimately that's just the way things are going to go. But we will see. UConn up 7 in this opening half, and now up 9. So I'm kind of enjoying the fact that this game is on. Ohio State, Illinois, just about to tip off as well. Did not have a play on this game. Ohio State +5, a popular play by some, as this game about to tip off in Minnesota. Earlier today in the Big Ten, Purdue beating Michigan State, but not covering 67-62 and under. Another one of those early day unders. JVT came home. And then Wisconsin started slow, but got the win. Is Wisconsin getting hot at the right time? This has been a team that got really high as maybe a 3 seed, dropped hard, and now JVT destroyed Maryland, beat Northwestern today. They'll play Purdue tomorrow. Let's see if an early line is out yet. I don't think I've seen an early line on that one. Oh, it is. DraftKings has Purdue laying 7. Pretty big number there in that one.
Almost in line with the KenPom projection. Who would have thought? No, I think, look, Wisconsin's going to be interesting because, I think we've always kind of believed that the ceiling was pretty high for this offense, right? That kind of showed consistently throughout conference play. The problem was in a lot of their losses, the defense stunk, like in a really big way. And in some of the games which they failed to cover, the defense really put up some clunkers. So if you're going to start to actually churn out some good defensive performances, they limited their first 2 opponents in the Big Ten tournament to less than a point per possession. Like, this can be a team that we kind of all expected them to be. By the way, as you mentioned, not only won, but covered today against Northwestern. So maybe it's the time to start buying on Wisconsin. I keep throwing out Nebraska as this team that everybody's going to kind of circle as a hot ticket item to make a run. But maybe we're all just sleeping on the Badgers. They're starting to find their form now, finally.
Yeah, the metrics have been high on the Badgers for quite some time. They hit a really rough spot after starting 16-4, and the month of February was not kind to this Badger team. But now they've won 2 in a row, wrapped up the regular season with a loss to Purdue. They play them tomorrow. I might be intrigued to look at the Badgers tomorrow, catching some points against Purdue, but we will see. By the way, closing seconds of the opening half, JVT, are we on first half spread watch here? I think this number was around 4.5, I want to say, between St. John's and UConn. And I think St. John's is
5 is what it closed.
Ooh, I think
the total is 70.
It is 50-47. St. John's just cut it to 3, but then they fouled UConn. So we could have some first half spread implications here in the closing seconds at the Garden. But this has been a really enjoyable opening half as this game closed 9.5. All right, while we wait for...
I think we're over the total of 70.
Yeah, I think slightly over the total there. Maybe you look second half under. We do have some free throws that are going to be important to some if you did bet the first half. JVT, you want to lead us off with the best bet?
Yeah, sure. Let's go to the NBA. Got a best bet in the association tonight. And this was, again, as we call them, right, the play of principle, which worked out last time with the Sacramento Kings at home against the Los Angeles Lakers. It is on the Los Angeles Clippers. So I've brought this up to you before, but it's worth reiterating for our audience. I think the market has kind of slept on the fact that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are playing through these back-to-backs this year. You generally see the market get a little too high on a Clippers opponent when you see them playing with no rest. And as I wrote about today, this is not a same situation. Now, this is, for the team itself, the 5th game in 7 nights, which is generally a negative spot, Tim. Having said that, it's not generally the same when you're talking about Kawhi Leonard missing time. This is just a back-to-back for him. Remember, he got pulled out of that Minnesota game. Paul George sat out of the Milwaukee game last weekend, so you're talking about this just being his 3rd game in 4 nights. So again, not overtly negative for the 2 guys that are the stalwarts of this team. So I think the market just kind of slept on the fact that these 2 could play. So I grabbed 7.5, got down to 6, but news just came down about 5 minutes ago. James Harden's not going to play. I wrote about it, though, figured that was going to be the case. Let's go back a couple of games ago. These 2 teams met on January 5th in New Orleans. The Clippers closed as 1.5-point favorites in that game. Yes, James Harden played. Then, when Los Angeles returned from a 7-game road trip a couple of weeks later, Clippers closed as 6-point favorites at home over the New Orleans Pelicans. And yet here they are, the number, a few shops are still hanging up a 7. Number just doesn't compute here, man. I'll take the chances. I will play the play of principle. Give me the Clippers. Took 7.5. I actually think it's playable down to 5.5. I think the market's a little off here.
By the way, we have yet another situation at the Garden where fingertips deciding outcomes. Now, not an outcome for the game, but if you remember last night, much to my chagrin, Marquette ran a beautiful inbounds play layup at the buzzer. It was initially counted good. They went to review. They said the ball had not left the fingertips. What ultimately happened? It was ruled not a basket. Marquette goes to overtime, not only wins, but covers the point spread. Here, in a first half where the point spread is 5, it is 52-47, JVT. Did this ball get out of his fingertips in time for those?
I don't know. It doesn't really look like it. But.
How about 2 straight games at the Garden with point spread implications? We will see if this bucket counts. We'll let you know. 52-49 is the score right now, but I don't know if they have officially said if it's a good or not good basket as of yet. All right, best bet for me, number 1. I've got 2 tonight. Let's go to Thomas and Mack. Late night. This game will maybe start at midnight Eastern, maybe even a little bit later. We've got Colorado State, JVT, going up against New Mexico. Market sits pretty much 2.5. However, DraftKings does have a 3 out there, and we're going to go grab that 3 with Colorado State, who has seemed to return to form. And what was interesting to me last night, you know I'm a big situational guy. New Mexico, as we discussed last night, it was one of my best bets. This was a team that needed to beat Boise State to have a shot to make the NCAA tournament. After the game, Jalen House, who was fantastic in that victory for New Mexico, 10-point win over Boise State, he said, when asked about making the NCAA tournament, quote, "This is my first tournament ever. I don't even know how to feel right now." And then also after the game, Richard Pitino said he would be shocked if they didn't make the field. Man, it feels like they put a lot of effort. If you watched that game last night, they were all in on it. The energy was incredibly high. They were the desperate team, JVT. And I'm not basing this bet solely off of that, but it feels like you're paying a little bit of a tax on this New Mexico team after what we saw last night because, oh, by the way, Colorado State looked very, very impressive in their performance against the number 2 seed in the Mountain West in Nevada, a team that you could argue, JVT, was playing the best of anybody in the conference coming into the Mountain West tournament. But because New Mexico had that last game and looked very good doing so, I feel like Colorado State is a little bit on sale here, and Nico Medved's squad has played twice against this New Mexico team. They're 1-1 straight up. They've covered both times. I will take Colorado State. Give me the 3. I think this is a very close game. I think Colorado State wins the game, but I'll take the 3 that is out there at DraftKings. Quick update. That basket, no good.
Nope.
52-47, your halftime score. Important basket to some there at the end of the first half. I have another best bet, but best bets today, JVT. We've got a sponsor of our best bets. What we got going on?
Yeah, with so many bottles to choose from, folks, it's easy to find your favorite. All at the lowest prices for over 30 years. Find what you love and love what you find at Total Wine & More. Drink responsibly and be 21.
That is Jonathan Von Tobel. I'm Tim Murray. Underway in Minneapolis. Ohio State early lead on Illinois, 7-4. We'll get you a primetime primer on the 7 o'clock Eastern games around college basketball. One more best bet from me, and thinking about a little show sweat, too. Yeah, you got to have something to sweat during the show. We'll get to that on the other side. It's VSiN Primetime.
This is VSiN Primetime with Tim Murray and Jonathan Von Tobel on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
New customers at DraftKings Sportsbook can bet $5. Get $150 instantly in bonus bets. All you got to do is use promo code VSiN when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Alongside Jonathan Von Tobel, I am Tim Murray. Best bets so far tonight. Rolling with Colorado State plus the 3 at Thomas and Mack. That number available at DraftKings. And JVT riding with the Clip Show on the road at New Orleans tonight.
And for our audience who's just joining us, James Harden officially ruled out, but that was taken into consideration for me when making the bet. So looks like it'll close 6.5, 7. Took 7.5. Again, I think it's playable down to 5.5. I think this number's a little too much on a couple of things. The negative situation for the Clippers and the thought that the Clippers have been downgraded, which they have. They're in a little bit of not a tailspin, but on a negative slant when it comes to their level of play. They were 6-point favorites over this Pelicans team like 2 weeks ago at home, and now they're catching 7 on the road. No.
For me, Colorado State, similar situation. I think Colorado State and New Mexico both playing well. I think this is a coin toss game, so you're going to give me 3 points with Colorado State, New Mexico. We were talking about it off the air. Richard Pitino, and hopefully he's saying this because New Mexico is by no stretch of the imagination a lock. Now, Jerry Palm of CBS Sports has them as a 10 seed. Saw a couple other bracketologists. Some have them in Dayton. Some have them on the 11 line, not going to Dayton. Last night should get them in, but there's still a very decent shot that if they lose tonight, they could miss the tournament because the A-10 is going to be a bid thief we know of. The American Athletic Conference certainly could be a bid thief. Hell, the ACC could have a bid thief with NC State. You never know.
Yep.
So there are plenty of scenarios where New Mexico does not get in. And, what helps them, Pittsburgh wins tonight in the ACC tournament. That would be bad for this New Mexico team. So Richard Pitino should be embracing the fact that we are not in, which clearly they embraced last night.
Yeah.
It just was a bit odd to me last night. They seemed to be kind of celebrating the fact that they were in the field. So we'll see.
And I think, to be fair, Pitino was a little bit more muted in his comments about it, right? Kind of made the case like, yeah, I think we should be in. Our resume's great, blah, blah, blah. Some of the players felt like they were rightfully so. They were in. I tend to still think that even if you were getting up for, obviously you need to get some wins after a tough loss, I think still competitive spirit, right? You're in a Mountain West championship.
Yeah.
You want to win one of those. So we'll see if that's going to be the case for them. And also, as you kind of alluded to, and you're not really saying, but I'll say it, they're a bunch of psychopaths, man. Like Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn. House specifically is an absolute nutball in a good way. Like, they're awesome.
He
They're
was
good
so
characters.
fun to watch last night.
We've told the story about his play on the floor against UNLV and the way he tries to get in opponents' heads. So he's a weird cat, but I also think that they're hyper competitive and ready to go any time out. And I just like this team a ton, man.
I do too.
And I still believe that they are a dangerous threat. Well, I guess that's what a threat is a dangerous threat. It's redundant. But I still think they're dangerous if they get in, which they should. I would say they're favorites to get in right now.
Yes, they're definitely a favorite to get in, and they should get in. I want to see them in, not only because of our future situation with them to make the Final Four, but I think this is a team that could do some damage. And Jalen House last night had 29 points, really impressive performance, and Donovan Dent was awesome in the victory last night for them as well. A couple games going on right now as we speak. Ohio State with an early 15-12 lead over Illinois. They were a popular play by some at VSiN, I know, today, taking the points with the Buckeyes. So a good start for the Buckeyes. We mentioned it at the half. UConn with a 52-47 lead, a late bucket waved off. It was still on the fingertips of the St. John's player, so that was waved off. First half, a push on that first half closing line of 5. Second half line at Madison Square Garden is 4.5, so back to the full game. Real quickly, another best bet for me, another late night game here in Las Vegas. Yesterday, we had on viral sensation Ben Wilson to talk a little Western Athletic Conference, and they have the double bye situation where if you're the 1 seed or the 2 seed, you go all the way to the semifinals, a la the West Coast Conference that also plays at the Orleans. So Grand Canyon is playing Seattle. Not a game that I'm betting. That game starting at 9 o'clock Eastern. The other game that I will bet, JVT, is UT Arlington against Tarleton State. We had the great Paul Stone in studio stop by, and he talked about Tarleton State just a couple weeks ago. Have had a hell of a year. They finished second in the conference, and they got a sweep of UT Arlington. And I went and took a look at what UT Arlington's been doing as of late, JVT. So they lost to Tarleton State a month ago, February 15th. Since then, since February 16th, this UT Arlington team is the 44th best team in the country, according to Bart Torvik. They have been playing phenomenal basketball, absolutely destroyed Stephen F. Austin last night. They have won every single game since that loss to Tarleton State by 2, by double digits. So I like the way that they are playing. And I think Tarleton State is a team that the metrics don't like them because they play a ton of close games. Now, you could say, hey, they know how to win close, and that's fair. But when you see this time after time, let's just use an example of the Minnesota Vikings. 2 years ago, what happened when they made it to the playoffs? Tarleton State, per KenPom, is the number 1 luckiest team in the country. So I think UT Arlington is slightly better right now. They've lost both times to this Tarleton State team, both by 2. I think they get their revenge tonight at the Orleans. I will take UT Arlington on the money line. Find the cheapest money line around -115, -120. So that is my second play of the evening. So my two best bets, UT Arlington money line, and then Colorado State +3, my two plays here tonight.
What does the luck metric factor in? Like one possession games, I assume, or something like that?
A lot of what's your success in these one possession games? Do not blow out opponents, etc. That's kind of the way it all plays out. Do you lose a lot of one possession games? All right, JVT, let's run through a couple of the games that are about to start. We'll start in the SEC. Interesting one here. Texas A&M taking on Kentucky. Kentucky got the bye to the quarterfinals. They're now out to a 6-point favorite. This is going to be my show sweat. I'm going to take 6 with the Aggies here. I think this is just a spot where Kentucky, when they start to get a little bit too much love, I felt like that's the time you need to go against them. Kentucky wrapped up the regular season. Nice win over Tennessee. High variance team, as we know. They could go out and mop the floor with this Texas A&M team, but Texas A&M very desperate. On the outside looking in right now, the NCAA tournament. Not an official play, but I'm going to take a little bit on Texas A&M here to keep this thing close, +6.
Yeah, I would agree, actually. This is one of the ones that I had circled for today if there was going to be a bet in college basketball amongst some others. But one of the things that Texas A&M works with them, too, and they're not as strong as some, but they're a little like, analytical, Darling-esque Texas A&M. They were one team that before they had gone on their losing streak in the SEC, a lot of people had circled, right? They had beat Tennessee and looked like they were going to be a pretty big threat. But I think when you look at Buzz Williams' squad, the first thing that sticks out to you is the best offensive rebounding team in the country against a somewhat small and slight front line for Kentucky, a team that really struggled to keep teams off the offensive glass, especially in SEC play. They're not really good on offense, but they can generate those second chance opportunities here. So I think they should be able to stay inside of this number. A decent defensive team should be able to slow down the pace as well. They were almost last in SEC play and pace. And the other interesting aspect of this, which is market really likes Kentucky here, like you said, up to 6. A lot of projections are in the 3-point range, which is pretty interesting. So I think all of those things put together make Texas A&M an intriguing bet here against Kentucky.
Yeah, I mean, and history has told us with this Kentucky team, the moment you fall in love with them, they beat all. The moment you hate them, they go to Auburn and they win by 11. Yep. Then the moment you fall in love with them, they lose to LSU, right? I mean, this team is so Jekyll and Hyde, and that's why I thought at a point when they were 20-ish to 1 to make the Final Four, I was like, yeah, sign me up. Now seems way overvalued. They beat Tennessee. They've won 5 in a row. Look, BBN, Big Blue Nation, might be rolling. Might be all just at the right time. But
careful.
I think Texas A&M intriguing spot here, catching 6 when everybody seems to be falling in love with Kentucky. Also, coming up top of the hour, Bubblicious Pittsburgh. They absolutely could use this win. Horrible non-conference. That is what is really holding back Jeff Capel's squad. They're catching 7.5, even an 8 out there at DraftKings against North Carolina. Feels like the Tar Heels, they're playing some of their best basketball right now, JVT. Yes. They are up to 7th in KenPom. They have been rolling. Wrapped up the regular season with a win over Duke. Smoked Florida State yesterday. No bet for me. Desperate Pittsburgh, but I would probably look favor to pass here in this one.
Actually, I lean a little maybe toward the under.
Okay.
I feel like with North Carolina, we obviously know the pace at which they want to play, and we know what Pittsburgh wants to do in terms of their pace as well. One of the slowest teams in the country, 282nd, and I think last in the ACC. I think that this is one where you're going to see a willingness to kind of slow down here, especially Pitt's going to force that action. I kind of like the way they're playing a little bit, right, down the stretch. They're actually playing pretty well. They've won 4 straight with some pretty solid wins. Look good against Wake Forest. I think they're going to be able to stay inside of this number, but I think more so, right, and obviously it correlates to the underdog. I think looking at this game under the total and Pitt being able to dictate its tempo a little bit more, I think that correlates to both the underdog and the under. So I thought the under was pretty live.
Right now at Bracket Matrix of 106 projected fields of 68, only 18 have Pittsburgh in it. So desperate spot for the Pitt Panthers. That game coming up top of the hour at home of the Washington Wizards there at Capital One Arena. That's JVT. I'm Tim Murray. Whole lot more to get to. More primetime primers, a bunch of NBA games starting at 7:10 Eastern. Stick around. It is VSiN Primetime.